Pleasant good morning, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. A special good morning to the media practitioners present here with us this morning and those who are supporting our conference by way of the available technologies. It's a special good morning to viewers, listeners in the diaspora community, and to say a happy thank you to all of you who are giving us of your time and effort to listening on this press conference that we've called here this morning. Let me start first by acknowledging the absence of our distinguished leader who is out of state in the United Kingdom on official party business, accompanied by, but in fact supporting Senator Chevron John, who is there in an international conference for women. And quite naturally, while they are there, you would expect he would share with our Vincentian community and do important party work. In his absence, I present this morning not so much as Vice President, but as the Shadow Minister of National Security, and oftentimes his spokesperson on economic matters on a number of issues that we consider to be germane to the health and well-being for blessed land, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I am privileged to have present with me one who I vote for, Honorable Fitz, and I shorten it, Brandon, representative for East Kingstown, and as our public relations officer said, our soon-to-be representative for South Central Windward, Senator Edward Bruce, who has made this conference a priority activity for him this morning. There are three principal features we will try to achieve in this press conference. First of all, is to sell to you and advertise to you that we as a party believe that it will be important in our political strategy and in our own accountabilities to you to have implemented a mechanism we titled a tracker to capture the broken promises, and there are very many, of the Unity Labour Party regime over the last 23 years or so. And this can be found quite naturally on the NDP page. And I will be assisted in that regard by our public relations officer this morning as to how you may be able to do so. I would speak both as a capture of broken promises, the Unity Labour Party's dismal record on national security, or as some like to simplify it, crime and violence, and to represent that too as a broken promise, and to divert from the temptation to confine ourselves to homicides, the man in the street before the word murder, but to get the assistance of my esteemed colleague, Senator Bruce, to address the pretty lasting component of that is so close to the heart of many of our rural communities and farm communities in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and leave for a large measure the expose on where we are in terms of broken promises, where we can go as the people on economic issues, to my esteemed colleague, Honorable Fitzbramble. So I begin this morning by raising with you an extract from the Unity Labour Party's presentation, Law and Order Manifesto of 2001. And I do so for good measure, because in a sense, you would believe that it is the NDP speaking about contemporary civilization in the Grenadines. But you be the judge. Law and order. And this is the Unity Labour Party speaking. Under the New Democratic Party, violence and other criminal activities threaten to turn our beautiful St. Vincent and the Grenadines into a most hostile and lawless state, in which our citizens, residents, and visitors fear for their safety and security. Similarly, there has been a frightening increase in the use of and trafficking in illegal drugs, particularly cocaine and crack. Of course, you recall the infamous statement of Mitchell and Toussaint, made by the now Prime Minister, then opposition member Ralph Gonsalves. This slide into decadence must be stopped as a matter of urgency. The restoration of safety, national security, peace, tranquility, respect for law and order, and the building of a drug-free society requires a renewed sense of personal responsibility. I underscore that's the conclusion of the Unity Labour Party of near 23 years ago. I think we in the New Democratic Party today can borrow wholesale, and as he would probably like to say, adopt those as our mantra. Members of the media, unbelievable but true, that the Unity Labour Party speaking 23 years ago talks of broken promises, failures, and incompetence. To add salt to the wound may be different. The ULP under the rubric pour to the communities in that same manifesto had this to say: our system of government, that is St. Vincent and the Grenadines, is far too centralized and inappropriate to the demands and circumstances of the new century. The Unity Labour Party strongly believes that the country will not progress well unless real political power resides in the people and the local communities. We find it timely to remind the government that it is us in the New Democratic Party who have been constantly promoting the call for a Citizens Development Fund to empower parliamentary representatives and constituencies, and by extension communities, to be masters of their own destinies. They, the Unity Labour Party, have fought tooth and nail so that this does not become a reality, and have rejected it out of hand as good policy or good politics, notwithstanding its tremendous success in Caribbean countries, St. Lucia, Belize, Jamaica, to name a few. The Unity Labour Party, they continue, they said, well, before I go there, let me just go back again to this notion of promoting local government and community development. And we want to say that the Unity Labour Party, of course, we're seeing to the demise of some 98 civil society organizations in the South Blessed Land. They met in office, these civil organizations, in 2001, including the very much respected National Youth Council, which they today have replaced by the growing police youth clubs, and again to use their language, under the suzerainty of the comrade and his self-appointed youth representatives. In speaking about power to the communities, they also had this to say: appoint or ensure the viable local communities and non-governmental organizations be built to sustain effective democratic local government. No. What have they done? They have appointed Minister of Grenadines Affairs and totally disregarded the presence, including and directly specifically, the leader of the opposition as member representing Northern Grenadines, who have their self-appointed non-cabinet member to be responsible for Grenadines affairs. How does that square with the notion of respect local governments? It is this said government that has ignored participation or involvement of elected representatives in capital project programs. Today, none of the representatives of East, Central, or West Kingstown have a clue as to the working paper surrounding the $600 million plus port development, because this is the modus operandi of the government, as they say, not to let the New Democratic Party into their title deed and sense of ownership of every square mile of the West, or is it every square inch? This brings us, members of the media, to the police force, which was their third commentary and indictment at the time of the New Democratic Party. And I extract this for conversation only. The Unity Labour Party has a manifesto for reform of the police force. And then they went on to say what the ULP government will do with regards to that reform. And they even went further to say that they will place a strong emphasis on having an independent inquiry into the structure and operations of the police force, with a view to taking corrective measures to enhance the efficiency, the quality of the police personnel, modernization, and accountability of the force. I ask rhetorically only of you, the media, are you aware of any independent inquiries into the police force? Are you aware of any of the structural changes into the police force and its operations? Do you have any ideas of these reform measures that have taken place over the last 23 years that has our police force functioning differently? Gonzalez, I would remind you, listeners and viewers, has overseen the service of more commissioners of police than any leader of this country in its entire history. In fact, as he would say, since conquest and settlement. He has seen out Commissioner Crow, whom he met, Commissioner Harry, whom he also met, Miller, who he appointed, Charles Hadaway, who was never confirmed, Colin John, and now Enfield Williams. It sounds like an alphabet of commissioners, all serving a single Minister of National Security. And the end product, more of the same, an escalation and rise of crime and order in St. Lucia and Grenadines. And as to improving markedly the facilities, including forensic facilities that they spoke of 23 years ago, I ask of you, the media, listeners and viewers, do we yet have a forensic lab in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Have the conditions of work, as they promised, really improved? Think of what we call police beds, mattresses, bathrooms that were on show recently, the hours of work for policemen. Do we meet ILO working standards that should be applicable to even the police force? Are promotions in the force open and transparent and motivating? We understand that some cases people act as corporals up to 8 years and without pay. What about our auxiliary police force, traffic wardens, etc.? What are their terms and conditions? Are they entitled to gratuitous considerations, including pensions, healthcare, provisions when they are involved on the job and are injured in the line of duty? Have they truly implemented HR practices that have been recommended? Is there respect for the existence of a police welfare association, or should I ask our own now, Brenton Smith, who once headed that organization? You know, it's already clear that the current Minister of National Security, your Prime Minister, emerges with a big F. And if you're guessing what that F means, it's for failure. Maybe, and maybe only, as a consolation, we can go back some 30 years, and he's celebrating that many years now in politics today, to a Labour MNU Unity Manifesto, General Election Promise of 1994, when they had this to say: our police force can boast of a large body of able and dedicated men and women. All of that we agree to. But they said then, and we asked them, what about the now? However, its poor leadership has caused disunity and ill discipline. Let me repeat the conclusion of the Unity Labour Party and Ralph Everton as Prime Minister. The poor leadership of our police force has caused disunity and this ill discipline. As Ralph corrected that, he seemingly has an act of manipulation that makes the good bad. He did, however, agree that the restoration of safety, peace, tranquility, respect for law and order, and the building of a drug-free, yes, he said that, building of a drug-free society requires social, economic, religious, and education efforts. In case you are asking where those quotations come from, I'm still reading from the Labour MNU Manifesto of 30 years ago. And I remind you again, because it warrants repeating, the building of a drug-free society. Remember the Mitchell Hussein statement. It has to be Mitchell's fault or Toussaint's fault, and they should go. Well, he should take a dose of his own medicine. The song, pretty much like deep in his heart, is quarrels with NDP over our prescriptive social, spiritual, and redemption charter are ill-founded. In fact, he speaks more today of the fact that it's unlikely to find a cadet, scout, or member of any of those organizations in trouble with the law than for those who do not. A good point to remind you listeners that many years ago, the New Democratic Party advanced that it cost $15,000 per prisoner per annum to keep a prisoner. And at that time, we were contributing $5 per member of the Cadet Scouts, Pathfinders, or other such organizations. So the little figures have moved. It is now $17,000 to keep one person at the prison. And it brings me into sharp reminder that only last week we saw large numbers, now 3,000 strong Girl Guide movements celebrating their Founders Day. Do you know how much each guide gets from the government for being a guide by way of support? $1. The allocation to the Girl Guide movement is $3,000 for the 3,000 guides that they are members. Yes, St. Vincent and Grenadines, all people yearn for the day when they can feel comfortable in public places and in public spaces. Need I say, in the privacy of their homes, because murders, homicides also takes place by that invasion of private property. Lest we forget, the number of homicides for 2020 was 33, 2021 32, 2022 42, 2023 it was 55, and for 2024 it's 7 so far, almost like a one a day tablet, one per week. We pray God that 2023 does not repeat itself, notwithstanding the strong commitment given by the recently appointed Assistant Commissioner of Police, who appeared to be working hard in this regard. And I do not call his name for good reasons. The New Democratic Party is determined that the state of violence and St. Vincent and Grenadines, homicides, is enough. I depart from script to make the point that this evening at 6, I will participate in the vigil in Old Montrose for a young man who was shot 2 weeks ago, about 20 yards away from where his friend and neighbor was shot. Last day of 23, virtually the beginning of 2024. Where I also attended the vigil, so that's almost 2 in 7 weeks, having vigils in Old Montrose. And my visitor at home, some things I do these days with a little bit of trepidation. Reveals that no provision was made whatsoever for security patrols on the days immediately following that homicide, and the homicide victim was a family member of that individual who was killed at Gibson Corner and was believed to know who took off his life. They were after some help in cleaning up some bushes in the area and for more patrols, and I will pursue that through the appropriate means. But this brings me to repeat a statement that I've made before. and I think it was at a press conference, and it was delivered by the senior superintendent of police in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the senior superintendent, Sean Henry. And he said this at the time in speaking to parents at a meeting called by the police service there. You parents, you are the parents of your children and your children's children. And you have a responsibility in order to take care of your children. And for far too long, when the parents have failed, the churches has failed, the school has failed, society leaves the responsibility to the police and the judiciary. And he said tonight, and he addressed the location where he was, West End, part of Trinidad. I am putting it squarely back to you, the parents of these communities, to ensure that we return to the bargaining table. That is to say, have parents take full charge of their children's upbringing. Members of the media, I wish at this stage to ask the assistance of Senator Bruce, my colleague, the caretaker of South Central Women, to address pretty lastly and how we are thinking in the New Democratic Party. Because while homicides are predominantly an urban-centered problem, that's in the city, Kingstown, the suburbs, and we had it in Layu recently. Pretty lastly is fundamentally a problem of rural St. Vincent. And my colleague has bent his back and drawn on his legal profession and experience to present some tangible approaches we can adopt. Senator Bruce.
Thank you very much, Major Leacock. I'd like to salute my colleagues at the head table, Major Sinclair Leacock and Brother Fitzgerald Bramble. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleagues for allowing me this opportunity to share in this important press briefing event. The event, which is headed by our leader on matters relative to the arresting of crime and criminal activities in St. Vincent and Grenadines, happens to bring into focus not only the prevalent criminal activities, but those which are perpetrated against farmers and fisher folks here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Allow me to say at this stage that as part of the New Democratic Party's 4 pillars for economic development proposal, that agriculture will be one of those 4 pillars. And it is in that particular but important context that looking at crimes and crimes committed against the participants in the agricultural subsector is important to this exercise. If one was to take a quick scroll through the media recordings, you would recognize and accept that sometime on or about the year 2010, that the Rural Constables Program was officially commissioned under the auspices of the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force. And so between 2010 and 2019, we have the program operating at various points across the country. The intent being to help to lend support to farmers and fisher folks against what had been developing as a spate of crimes against them. A few years ago, the government intimated that they were going to follow that program. In the nation's parliament, I went on the record to say that I did not support the folding up of that program, the dismantling of that rural constables program. You recall that in some regards, these rural constables were described as glorified chefs, and other descriptives not so fitting were used to describe and to attack the program. Today, I advance again for the benefit of all our listeners and viewers that in keeping with our own proposal and understanding that agriculture will play a significant role in advancing the St. Vincent economy under a new Democratic Party government, I seek now to speak to you as to how, again, a new Democratic Party government will lend our support to farmers and fisher folks who are at the constant receiving end of criminal activities across St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So the first thing that has to happen, in our respectful view, is to bring an end to the current position. And by that, I mean to reintroduce the Rural Constables Program. It cannot and ought not to be reintroduced in the format whole scale as it was before, or else some of the very challenges will still be met. What has to happen is that we need to flesh out the Rural Constables Program in proper ways. For us to be able to do that, we have to ask ourselves, why did it fail? Why did the program fail? We're satisfied in our minds that that program failed because it was not properly resourced. So that the persons employed as rural constables did not receive sufficient training to assist with the administration of the program. In addition to that, insufficient financial and administrative resources were provided to the Rural Constables Program. The program was managed by and large and principally through the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force. No one knew who was the lone superintendent of police or assistant superintendent of police who was managing up that program. So that you know once that there was an issue pertaining to perennial larceny or the damage and destruction of farm crops and animals or lobster pots or what have you, that this is where the direction went. So we say that we in the New Democratic Party will ensure that the program of rural constables will be properly financed, that resources will be provided to the rural constables. We're not talking about a program where a farmer makes a call to a constable, a rural constable that is, who then has to turn to a constable or a sergeant at the police station, who then says to the rural constable, we don't have transportation, so we can't help. We are talking a rural constables program that is equipped, for example, with sufficient transportation provisions to allow them to do their work, almost independent of the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force. So, the strengthening and the capacity building and enhancement of that program is a first but fundamental step to assisting our farmers. One of the other things that we note is that the thieves operate as if they have no restriction. They have very little care about what happens to them in the long run. And therefore, be put it on the table before my colleagues at Cabinet that we seek to amend the laws currently on the books to ensure that the penalties for persons found guilty of stealing from farmers and fisher folks, that those penalties are made stiffer. And so I want those of you out there who are engaged in the practice of stealing people's crops, animals, and fisherfolk implements, etc., that you must know that a new Democratic Party government will be harsh, will be tough, will be severe on you if you're caught in this act. Ever too often, when persons are caught in this act, or when animals destroy other farmers' produce, it takes almost forever for the farmer who is so affected to see that some justice is had. We would look seriously at a court system that would bring resolution to these activities, these criminal activities, as swiftly as we possibly can. And I want the farmers and fisher folks to know that we are committed to this cause. At times, persons who are involved feel that because of the lack of police presence, that they are more likely to escape being caught, prosecuted, convicted, and punished for their criminal activities. And so I will be saying to my colleague, who I assume will take responsibility for national security in the new government, that I need all the support that I can get to ensure that the farmers get the relevant protection that they deserve. That's farmers and fisher folks across the country. And by that, I will be asking for an enhanced budgetary allocation for roving police units, so that you are not going to be as certain as to when roving officers will be in your district. What time of the day, what time of the week, what time of the month, what time of the year. So we will make your operations uneasy to carry through. I listened to one of my viewers who spoke to a Facebook posting that suggested that we should look at having undercover officers to help in the fight of crimes of this sort. I am prepared to listen and to engage the thoughts and suggestions of those who want to see the back of this type of criminal activity. And so, whatever suggestions you have that will help to complement the proposals that I've put on the table or that I've put it on the table, rest assured that you will be listened to and accommodated to ensure that there is a collective in the fight against these types of crimes. Another fundamental act that has to be undertaken is that the fraud in the Farmers ID program will have to be attacked immediately and frontally. And I want to send a very clear message to those persons who are in possession of Farmers ID, but know that they are not farmers. You should do the right thing and turn in those ID cards to the relevant authority. I want to say to current state officials who know that they are facilitating persons who are not farmers with Farmers ID, I want you to recognize that you are doing the nation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines a disservice. You are doing the farmers and fisher folks of St. Vincent and the Grenadines a disservice. Why do I say so? A number of these persons who are not bona fide farmers and fisher folks find themselves armed with this important weapon called a Farmers ID. And then they use it to assist the people who are involved in perennial larceny to sell on the items that they have stolen. Or some of them themselves have IDs knowing that they are simply engaged in stealing people's produce and that they're not farmers. In essence, what we're doing, for those of us who are assisting them in getting these IDs, we are aiding and abetting the commission of criminal activities against the farmers and fisher folks of this country. Under a new Democratic Party administration, that will be brought to a swift end. And make no bones about that. I also had recourse to have a conversation with another farmer who intimated that they know of persons who were facilitated to get the farmer's ID, not so that they can go and help persons who steal crops and animals, Major, but that they can use it and present it to get duty-free allowance to get vehicles into the country. Now, I don't have a difficulty with bona fide farmers getting the necessary duty allowance to help them to drive this sector of the economy. But we must not cheat the system in the way that it's alleged by putting the farmer's ID in the hands of persons who are not farmers themselves. So we will clean up the fraud within the system. And I want to say this here and now. I've been having discussions with persons who care and have concerns about this particular program. I am equally aware that there are current plans afoot to remove the administration of the Farmers ID program from where it is currently administered within the Ministry of Agriculture, because some pushback is being met by some staffers in the ministry. So I want to say here and now, and I want to speak pointedly to the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, that if there are plans afoot to remove that program from where it is currently being administered and to take it to a separate department within the ministry for the purpose of enhancing the program, I welcome the move. If the move, however, is to facilitate the continuation of the fraud that is perpetuated on the state, on the people, on the farmers and fisher folks, I want to say to you, I am aware of the plan. So make sure that the object of the plan is positive and well intended for the benefit of the people of this country. Because if it is not, I will be the force to call you out. Part of the challenge that the farmers face also is because there are not proper markets for their farm produce. They find themselves having to leave their produce in the soil a little more than is expected, and the thieves roll in and they capitalize. It is the responsibility of the Ministry of Agriculture, jointly with the Ministry of Trade and the other relevant departments or sub-departments of government, to ensure that we hold the hands of our farmers and fisher folks and give them the best opportunities that there can be. Rest assured, my friends, that with a new Democratic Party government, that we are not going to be rehearsing lines for rehearsing lines' sake. We're not going to be talking about being tough on crime and cause of crime because there are words that could slide off our tongue. We are saying here and now that if you continue to take advantage of our farmers and our fisher folks, a new Democratic Party government will ensure that you pay the price. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Senator. Members of the media, I now ask my colleague, member for East Kingsdown, to address us on matters of national economics and the economy.
Thank you very much, Vice President Leacock, and my parliamentary colleague, Senator Bruce, as well. Members of the media, viewing and listening community, I consider this to be a very important function in my journey as parliamentary representative for East Kingstown, being here today in this press briefing, press conference. And one of the more important things that we need to highlight, and I'd like to re-emphasize what's been mentioned before by my colleagues at the head table, is our broken promises tracker, which has been launched and will be available for the viewers, for the citizens of this country. Because as a parliamentary opposition, one of our main functions is to hold the government accountable, to make sure that they do what they say they're going to do, and to make sure that they deliver in the interest of the development of our people. And that has not been the case pretty much with this current administration. This Unity Labour Party government, they have been taking this country for granted. They have been making promise after promise, and they have failed to deliver. In fact, just recently in their 2020 manifesto, they have made over 100 promises. And almost 4 years later, they have been unable or unwilling, quite contemptuously, to fulfill even a quarter of that manifesto, those promises, those 100 promises. And these manifestos are not meant to be a list of hopes or ideas. These manifestos presented by political parties are our commitment to the people of the country, our commitment to the electorate whom we are trying to get, whose confidence we are trying to get to govern and to guide and to develop the country, and what we are going to do going forward. And as I said previously, this Unity Labour Party administration has failed in so many regards, not only in their manifesto, by the way, but if you allow me to make reference to a document that I'm going to highlight here. This document is the National Economic and Social Development Plan, 2013 to 2025. This document was tabled in Parliament almost 11, 12 years ago. And it contains the government's plan, the government's commitment to the people of this country of what they are going to do to develop this country, to improve the lives of our citizens. And I wish to refer to some of the strategic goals and objectives outlined in this plan, and to show you where the government has failed miserably in accomplishing these plans. The plan highlights or mentions the vision set forth in Vincent and the Grenadines and the proposed development strategies for the country will, if carefully pursued, lead to balanced, comprehensive, and sustainable development. Well, we have not had balanced, comprehensive, nor sustainable development, certainly not during the period of this plan, since 2013. And the question may be asked, well, why is that the case? Let me quickly and as succinctly as I can now refer to some of the objectives outlined in this plan, what this government, this Unity Labour Party government has promised, legally, by the way, because this is a document that was tabled in Parliament, the National Economic and Social Development Plan, 2013 to 2025. Under the first goal, re-engineering economic growth, the first objective is to maintain strong macroeconomic fundamentals. So this current administration, back in 2013, 11, 12 years ago, they promised and made a commitment to this country to maintain strong macroeconomic fundamentals. And these are some of the outcomes they intended to accomplish. Increased national wealth. Have we increased our national wealth since 2013? I'd leave that answer to be determined by you. Jobs created. This is one of the macroeconomic fundamentals that this government committed to accomplish, to create jobs in our country. It is no secret that the unemployment rate in our country has been the highest ever in the history of this country. And it might sound like a broken record, but that is the fact. And we need to keep re-emphasizing this so people understand what is going on and the extent and the magnitude of the failure of this administration. They have not done a labor market survey for the last at least 5 years. So the official statistic of our unemployment rate being about the high 20s to almost 30% could be quite well conservative. Youth unemployment is over 40%. And those are the official statistics. You wonder why a labor market survey has been delayed for some time. And I rather suspect that it's because they're afraid to discover and reveal the true extent of our unemployment rate in this country. Another of the strong macroeconomic fundamentals that this government pledged and committed to accomplish in this National Economic and Social Development Plan was to poverty reduced consistent with the Millennial Development Goals. Well, we know the extent of poverty in this country. When the last poverty assessment was done in 2008, 16 years ago, and at that time, it was determined that 30% of our population is living below the poverty line. What that simply means is that the poverty line is an international standard established to determine what an individual would need for basic survival. And the last time I checked, that was determined to be somewhere about $15 or $16 a day. Back in 2008, that's what you needed in order to be considered living above the poverty line. And at that time, it was determined that 30% of our population was living on $15 to $16 a day or less. Fast forward to 2024, 16 years later, no poverty assessment has been done over the last 16 years. And we know you only need to walk around and look and ask. Some of us, many of us experience it ourselves. What you could have gotten for $15 in 2008, you can't even get anything close to that in 2024 when you factor in inflation and other factors. So it is conceivable and reasonable to say that in 2024, our poverty rate is way more than 30% in this country. And incidentally, I dare to say that it would take much more than $15 a day to be considered living above the poverty line. And when you factor in the level of unemployment, people who are not working, it is frightening to say the least. Frightening to say the least. Even if you consider the most recent initiative and attempt by the government to increase minimum wages to $50 a day or $1,000 a month, consider a family of, let's say, a single mother with 2 or 3 children and $1,000 a month, $50 a day. It puts you right back into the situation of poverty and extreme poverty. This is a very, very serious situation that we really need to hold this government accountable to. And that is why we are launching this Broken Promises Tracker, so that the public, the citizens of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, can continue to monitor and hold this government accountable to the broken promises. Let me just continue referencing the National Economic and Social Development Plan 2013 to 2025. I'll just go on now to goal. We're still on the goal number 1, re-engineering economic growth. And another objective under that goal is to attain a strong and sustainable external trade position. Well, let me tell you, in 2022, St. Vincent and the Grenadines had a trade deficit of over $1 billion. What that simply means is that in 2022, we spent about $1.1 billion on importing goods into this country, and we only earned $93 million from exporting goods out of this country. This is another very serious issue because it points to several factors. One, when you're spending so much money to import global foreign exchange, which is one of the foundational pillars of our economy, and ensuring sustainability, because most of the goods that we import come from countries whose currency is much stronger than ours. That is one. Secondly, when your level of exports is less than $100 million in an economy which boasts a GDP of over $2 billion, it tells you that there's not much happening in the country in terms of economic activity. We can't even produce enough to export $100 million. And so we end up with a trade deficit of about $1.05 billion. In other words, we are importing the money that we are spending to import goods into this country relative to what we are earning from what we export is about $1 billion. And that is a serious, serious indictment on this government. They promised to attain a strong and sustainable external trade position 11 years ago. And the situation has worsened significantly. And they ought to be held accountable. We shall not allow them to continue to get away with these broken promises, even the ones to which they are legally bound in this National and Economic Social Development Plan. One of the outcomes that they promised in attempting to attain a strong and sustainable external trade position was to finalize an export strategy and implement it by 2050. That was supposed to be a strategy, a guideline for this country enhancing and increasing its level of exports. This strategy was supposed to have been finalized and implemented by 2015. Almost 10 years ago. We're still waiting for the strategy to be presented. And we wonder why they are unable and contemptuously unwilling to accomplish the objectives outlined in this plan. Another of the objectives that they promised in this plan right here was to reduce our national debt, our debt to GDP ratio to 60%. What it simply means is that every dollar that this country generates from economic activity, they promised that we would only owe 60 cents out of that dollar in debt. Today, 11 years after that promise was made in this National Economic and Social Development Plan, our debt to GDP ratio is 85%. In other words, every dollar that we generate from economic activity, we owe 85 cents in debt. So we only have 15 cents available to us. And the problem that creates, it signals, one, that again, our level of economic activity is so poor that we really don't generate much compared to how much we are borrowing to take this country forward. And a lot of the borrowing is unsustainable. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, just as recently as 2022, indicated that if things don't turn around significantly, we run a very high risk of debt distress. And what that simply means is that if this government continues down the path of borrowing, and not being able to pay back and sustain our economy, we will find ourselves in a situation where we may not be able to pay back our debt. And that is going to significantly infect maybe a fortuitous slip of the tongue, but affect our social and economic development, because if you can't afford to pay back your debt, which is what the IMF is saying may very well happen, we run a very high risk if we don't do something and do something urgently, such as growing our economy, then things like healthcare, education, social security, safety and security, all of those social and economic developmental issues will suffer significantly. And we may very well find ourselves in a situation where the government may have to increase taxes to a large extent. And we know the implications of that. So again, failing to deliver on their promises in not only in their manifesto, but in the National Economic and Social Development Plan is serious cause for concern. My colleagues have touched on the crime situation. And so it is safe to conclude that this government really has no plan. This ULP government has no plan for the economy. And we hear the Prime Minister come in and very, what I would consider to be irresponsibly referring to the New Democratic Party as stealing their ideas when we talk about the 4 pillars of our economy. So here is what the New Democratic Party will do differently, because we stand for creating an economy where everyone has an opportunity to make a decent living. The New Democratic Party stands for an economy that values those who get up early, work hard, and make a living. We believe in the New Democratic Party that we have to build an economy where everyone has the opportunity to contribute. And I didn't talk about inequality when I referenced the National Economic and Social Development Plan. But that is also a big and growing concern. The gap between the haves and the have-nots, the gap between the rich and the poor is getting huger and bigger almost by the day. And we are going to make sure in the New Democratic Party that we will make progress on building an economy that delivers for all. We will focus on investing on the 4 pillars of our economy, as we mentioned on previous occasions and wish to reiterate again. Agriculture, on which my colleague Senator Bruce touched on earlier, tourism, the blue economy, and the new economy. The 4 pillars of our economy will be the driver of economic growth. When we invest in these 4 pillars, we are guaranteeing, there's no rocket science to this. You don't need to be an economist to understand, given our natural endowment, given our location, given what we have in terms of the knowledge, skills, and resilience of our people, what it will take to take our country forward. So the 4 pillars of our economy have huge potential to massively increase production, leading to more exports and creating more jobs. Of course, there are other parts of our economy that would have to complement and build that foundation that the 4 pillars will establish, such as a strong and thriving public sector to underpin these 4 pillars. We want to encourage, and we will be encouraging, innovation and entrepreneurship so that people can set up their own businesses. And time permitting, we will get into some of the details of what the New Democratic Party will be doing under these 4 pillars. But the harsh reality is that this Unity Labour Party government, they really don't have any plan. And the one instant when they had an opportunity via the National Economic and Social Development Plan to really make a difference, they squandered that. They couldn't even stick to their own plan for development of this country. And we are saying that is the difference between the Unity Labour Party administration and the New Democratic Party government in waiting. We have a plan, we will deliver on that plan, and we will make sure that we enhance and improve the lives of the people of this country. Thank you. Major, back to you.
Thanks very much, MP Bramble. Members of the media, we have presented to you that this morning we are putting in place a mechanism to track these broken promises. We have heard both of my colleagues speak on the importance of the pillars of the economy, which our leader repeatedly highlights. I simply want to underscore that in the context of me presenting this morning on the broken promises and the failure with respect to national security, safety, law and order, that it is not difficult for you to understand and appreciate that pillars are as solid as the foundation upon which they are planted, established. And so the adage of health before wealth is a good guide. A healthy society is a wealthy one. And a secured society is a prerequisite to attract investment and to develop and the entrepreneurial class. And we therefore commend to you that this new Democratic Party is well placed, on the right track, with a good team, an experienced team, and a focused leader to deliver that better sentence in the winning. I take your questions now at this time. My schoolmate. I don't think I have the ability to call it that at a press conference. And if you were calling me, you would identify me differently. But how are you, good, brother? Take it. Anything that you want to raise to any of us, we'd be glad to assist.
So you say, Mr.
Bruce.
Said, you talk about the breakdowns and so what you see the situation like right now?
How is the situation is going to plan out? Right.
Fine.
Or panel. Well, as I indicated earlier, part of the challenge that the program had is that it was not properly resourced. So as part of our budgetary exercise, we will ensure that human, financial, and administrative resources are sufficiently allocated to assist those persons who will either return to or new ones who will come into the Rural Constables program that would lend that support to farmers and fisher folks across the country. That's a sure way of making clear our commitment that fisher folks and farmers are guaranteed that these support mechanisms or this support mechanism is in place to help them to be able to rest at day and at night.
If I could just add to the response there, because sometimes we need to sharpen the focus of how this socially matters. If you look at the police force as it is constructed now, there are units which you can identify easily and for the purpose and for the mission. Special Services Unit, the Black Squad, Sex Unit, he said, the Traffic Department, because you know that they're laser focused on a particular objective. I think it's that kind of thing we want to see happening with respect to farmers' protection and assistance. A unit, no nonsense. You thief, you get punished.
This part of the farmers' training.
Yes.
So very interesting. So you have a department that offering aid to farmers.
Well, as I
a platform to facilitate.
yes, as it is currently constituted, there's no fun about it. There's no fun about it. There's no joke about it. There's nothing politically nasty about it. It is just a fact. Well, that part of thank you, Coach. Part of what we're doing in laying out how we propose to deal with these problems is also helping to underscore the problems so that persons are aware. And I'm not speaking to the unaware. I made reference when I spoke to the budgetary conversation. I pointed out where farmers were convened in several consultations across this country, and where the farmers themselves have complained to the Minister of Agriculture, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Prime Minister that the problem of persons who are not farmers, not bona fide farmers, but have farmers' ID in their hands is creating a significant problem, in that it is helping to support the thieves in some regards. And in other instances, some of those persons who do not farm, but have the ID. They themselves are engaged in stealing other people's stuff and selling them on. So it is a fraud that has been perpetrated on legitimate, bona fide farmers in this country. And so I want it to be clear. We want it to be clear. The New Democratic Party wants it to be abundantly clear that we will rescue that problem with immediacy. We will be laser beam focused on rooting out any fraud in that program. Yes, because it's one thing to ask the rural constables. I mean, when you check on some of the critique that was had, there was reference to a rural constable, Mr. Marlon Tommy, out in the Georgetown district, where convictions were had. Tommy was able to successfully take matters to the court and there were convictions, right? But the point that I'm making is how much time, what is the distance in time between the arrest or the charging of a person and the person appearing in court and the matter being brought on in? Because the regular courts still have to deal with the traffic matters, the criminal matters, the other civil matters. And so invariably you find that some of these matters pertaining to matters affecting farmers get pushed down the line. Mind you, the farmer lives by way of his farm. And if the supermarket in town finds a thief, that person is arrested, taken to court, swiftly prosecuted. Sometimes the item stolen is in still perfect condition, restitution. So the supermarket is fine. But the farmer whose animals are gutted and gone need to spend not that long in time to get some remedy, to get their matter concluded and to have justice. And so we are saying that we are going to look favorably, seriously, at how do we beef up our court system to say, because if we are saying that we are saying it, that agriculture is going to be one of the pillars to help to drive the economy. It cannot just be us lip servicing to the people. We are saying that there is a compact and understood plan as to how all of these tentacles are going to come together to make agriculture that significant contributor to economic development for St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
All extent this practice of the non-farmers, farmers who's to get the consistent.
Well, I can't speak to you as to the deepness of it or the wideness of it, but the fact that there is a single, at least a single suggestion that it has happened is enough to say that it has to stop. We need to ensure that the people who benefit from the program are the people who are legitimately helping to drive that particular sector of the economy. Mind you, I just saw where about 10,000 broilers have been handed out to several farmers and prospective farmers. Yes? And one has to say, look, good. It's nice that farmers are getting an opportunity like this. But when I grew up as a boy, there was a condiment that we used to go to the shop and buy and suck on. It was called No and Later. So that's what is happening now, that you hand out these broiler balls to these farmers. But if we do that, that will be pleasure now for them. But if stuck between the middle of now and after or later is the constant inaction of this government, it will be pleasure now and pain later for these very farmers who are smiling and receiving their broiler chicks. Because we don't want the Peruvian larcenists to go on their farms and steal their broiler chicks. And after all their investment in time and money, they end up with the SN of the state.
Any further questions?
I think I felt pretty last because in January I asked Commissioner of Police about this question because while we do have a pretty loss in the last minute act,
Yes.
it is hardly ever enforced. Even when people are allegedly caught with farm produce, they are charged with simple theft. But my understanding is that the previous
Charged with simply,
with
it's not distinguished.
rather than with criminal loss. So my question is, what do you think can be done to make well? And when I asked the commissioner, the explanation he gave is that the police or the prosecutor generally go for the offense under which they can more easily get a conviction. So if we have this law and it's not enforced, even if you set up a dedicated police unit, and then people just chat with, what steps do you think can be done to ensure that the charges are brought under the appropriate section of the law?
Thank you so much again, Kenton, for that most important question. I have addressed it in part because essentially what the commissioner, the office of the police force who you spoke to, is suggesting to you is that they fail to go under the Perennial Larceny Act, which would carry a stiffer penalty, and go for the straightforward regular theft under the criminal code. But I also said that as part of our responding to this situation is that I will be piloting a bill through the parliament in the New Democratic Party government to make stiffer the penalties for persons who are caught committing these offenses, so that the criminal code will be amended.
But the point is, sir,
Yes, go ahead.
Even if we have stiff penalties and people are not charged under the act, then what's
Right. So the point that I'm taking, is that if under the Perennial Larceny Act, let's say the punishment for being caught stealing an agricultural product happens to be 2 months imprisonment, but regularly you might get a reprimand and discharge under the criminal code. We'll bring the criminal code to come in line with the Perennial Larceny Act. So either way is that you go. Once you're caught, the full force of the law is going to be upon your back. So there'll be no loophole for you to walk through if you're charged under the regular criminal code.
Okay, now the government recently, the Prime Minister spoke up, gave some comments about how Sandals will be procuring its fish. They made some suggestions about how they will be accessing agricultural produce, speaking about data.
Yes.
And I wonder if the NDP has any comments.
Well, Kenton, I think your question was properly answered this week by the president of the Fishermen's Association in what I consider, or we consider to be a win-win situation. And his explanation was that currently the fishermen or the fisher folk with all of the travails sell their produce to the fish market. And he said by so doing, they get a better price than if they sold to the fish vendors, who they perceive as middlemen. And therefore, he says, his argument is that fundamentally, if we are doing that, the fish market really represents an aggregator. They are collecting in large quantities from a plurality of fisher folk. And they can be a major supplier to the hotel. And that makes sense to me, because that helps everybody. Because you would recall from your very proficient work as a journalist that the fisher market itself was having so difficulties. Obviously, the dance can't pay for the lights, that they won't make enough money to even produce ice or to pay the electricity bills and so on and so forth. And if they now have a ready market that they can sell, they also are in a position to negotiate price with the hotel rather than the hotel determining what they must. They will no longer have to be price taker, because we are the ones who are selling you the fish. And you're not going to go out to Sylvan to get it. You're going to get it from us, and there's an adequacy of it. And the government supports the fact that there's an adequacy. It's a government-sponsored agency as well, the fish market. It's not an independent agency. It's just supported. So it's strengthening the fish market, fishers relationship.
Be that as it may, one has to appreciate also Sandals is a private company and would make its own business arrangements. But I think into that equation, we also have to factor in the fact that rainforest has a certain certain concessions, including tax exemption.
You know what they are?
But the government did, I think the government spoke to some of them.
No. Have you ever seen it?
I haven't seen it, but I think the government has spoken publicly about it.
So we understand where you're going, and I support what you're saying. But should we see it as an opposition party?
Well, the question I wanted to ask is that how does a government in this context, where you have two private companies, both of them, one which has the government has spoken publicly about certain concessions, and the other, Sanders, one would presume, would have a certain extent of concessions to bring them to submission and encourage the investment. So the point is, how does a government negotiate that environment?
Yet, and there's something that we refer to in my field of study. And the subject matter is called business, government, and society. And the notion is that you should have a harmonious balance between business interests, government interests, and societal interests. And it is the responsibility of government to build that harmony. You cannot have a society in which you invite in foreign investments, or for that matter, promote local investments, and end up with a situation of a government within a government. Government must have regulations, and it must always have societal interests at heart, even while it is promoting a private sector. So private sectors can be allowed to be laws unto themselves and to be driven by, in this case, artificial rents that they have in a monopoly, or special provision out of tax incentives, such that they are unfair to the housewife, they're unfair to the fisher folk, they're unfair to the government, they're unfair to the government institutions, and they are just swimming in profit. No, there has to be a balance.
Well, Major, may I say by extension, because it's a very important question that the journalist has asked. And we must unwrap that question by looking at it also in this way. That the entity Rainforest, having entered upon the shores of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it is my understanding that that particular entity was, of course, brought in, invited, accepted to be here, with a view that Rainforest will assist with the export, taking fish and fish products from the shores of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and put it into regional and international market as part of us driving, of course, the export-led economy, and also to help with job creation. In the case of the hotelier, Sanders, the issue here is for them to deal with local consumption. So the point that my esteemed vice presidential colleague has made about the fish market acting as an aggregator to sell on to the hotel is for local consumption. And to me, there is nothing that becomes unfair, unkind, or undevelopmental if we understand that Rainforest will focus on the regional international market, but the local fishermen's entity here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the marketing corp or whatever you call it, that they could assist to function as an aggregator as it currently are. So says the president of the National Fishermen's entity, that they could sell on to Sanders and both ends could be met at the same time.
The thing here, because I mean, and Kenton, if I may be allowed to call it Forsten, has to understand, we're in a railroad, and that takes us full circle back to the pillars of the economy. And that's why Dr. Friday has highlighted we will separate agriculture from fisheries, which the term blue economy is very well established now. St. Vincent and the Grenadines at present does about $5 million worth of fish business, because our technologies are not where they should be. Grenada, our neighbors, who once came to buy fishing implements from Lollies and Company, does $150 million. So what does that tell us? We have to begin with, whether it's agriculture or whether it is,
Agriculture.
no, I wasn't going to, whether it is the fishing or whether we're speaking about the domestic market or more equally importantly, the export market, that we have to address a production problem and a productivity problem to satisfy both domestic and export. We have to produce more and more and more, because ultimately, if we don't, and demand outstrips supply, what happens? It's not rainforest, it's not sandals, it's not the fish market. It's the housewife can't now A, get fish, and B, pay for the price of fish, because it's gone beyond the reach and driven by market forces. And so we have to have that harmonious balance where we are looking at the people who are our first responsibility.
If I may, Kenton, I don't want to prolong the response to that question, but I think it is a very serious and important question. And my colleagues who spoke on it before me, I think they addressed it quite brilliantly, if I may use that term. But let me just add my little 2 cents on it. You know, as someone who's had some experience working in another jurisdiction in another country with regards to investment attraction and so on. And anytime a government or any locale attempts to attract investors, it must ultimately be for the benefit of the citizens of that locale, in this case, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Obviously, no investor is going to want to go into any particular situation unless they can foresee some sort of profit and benefit for them as well. So as Major said a while ago, we have to strike that balance. But you cannot, whatever it is that investment is going to generate must benefit the average man and woman on the street of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in this case. You can't, as we say, cut off your nose to spite your face. And one has to critically and very carefully negotiate these agreements, whatever concessions you're going to give. I mean, questions can be asked. For example, I don't have a problem with concessions being offered, let's say, to Sanders during the construction of the facility and these kinds of things. But the question must be asked is does it make sense from a Vincentian standpoint, or even from Sanders' standpoint, to offer concessions on food and beverage once your operation is up and running? These are some of the issues, and I'm not giving an answer one way or the other, but I'm just highlighting these issues as important issues when you're negotiating and trying to attract investors into this country. Sanders is undoubtedly the largest foreign investor in St. Vincent and the Grenadines today. So we have to make sure that the average man and woman on the street can benefit in a significant way or in a practical and tangible way. Yeah, we appreciate the jobs that are being created down at Sanders and so on and so forth. But is that the best we can do?
And also information in the public domain suggests there's some familiar links between the owners, at least the founders of the rainforest and Sanders. Do you think that there's a situation where these 2 entities were orchestrated to note something sinister, but it was organized in such a way that essentially you have a conglomerate or one army in the act?
Kenton, these are not new challenges to any intelligent and government that runs businesses. And it's not peculiar to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This happens in the great United States of America. It happens in Canada. It happens all over Europe. It happens throughout the Caribbean. Governments always have to be mindful of their relationships with international business corporations, or multinational corporations, MNCs, or businesses within the society that gets to that size that they present challenges to the government's interests and the people's interests. And you have it, this one is coming now in the retail trade, in the tourism sector. We've had a thing with, for example, with electricity in the region. And some governments have had to take the position that we can't just simply allow to franchise out the electricity supply that you sell, and then you sell it at a price that is not affordable within the reach of the consumers. So a government, you can't have some investment. Let me get straight to the point. You can't have a situation where we now suddenly become Sanders and the Grenadines. It has to be St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So that's the wider and better interest. And we have to give and assume good intent on the part of the business interest. But when we see that it comes into conflict with government's role and responsibility as an arbitrator, and it conflicts us with the best interests of the housewife, the man on the street, then there's the role for government as to intervene. My colleague Bramble said a while ago that they're the biggest investor. Well, I go slowly on that statement, but I believe then so in a particular context. That they will employ what, 500 now in the construction phase, maybe 1,000 when it's set down. Most speakers have been here for a long time with us. They pay very high wages and far higher than Sanders will pay. They employ much larger numbers. The cruise sector, they're not anchored here, but the numbers of people, Vincent, who are on the cruise lines are also larger in numbers. But the demands on the society are not of the same imposition as this new business interest has to. So that's why we have to see the agreements. That's the role for government. That's the role for Prime Minister. That's the role for Dr. Fred.
And just to quickly add on to what Major is saying there, we talk about lack of accountability of this government, an investment the size of Sanders. And that's why we have all these questions and we are just not sure of what pertains, because you can't tell me that a sizable investment such as Sanders and the official parliamentary opposition has no clue as to the agreement. I mean, of course, nobody's asking for detailed disclosure of the agreement between Sanders and government, but certainly, as the representatives of the people in parliament, at the very least, we ought to be apprised of the general terms of the contract, if nothing else. And that is why we have all of these questions being asked, because people just don't know. No, I wasn't suggesting there's anything wrong, but there might be some sensitivity in certain areas. I don't know. But that's why I said, at the very least, we ought to have some knowledge of what the agreement is all about.
But we've been there before, Kenton. Remember the Great Petrie-Creve Agreement? It arrived and departed from the Grenadines. And there was hundreds of millions of dollars. We had money spent without the lawful authority of the Parliament of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Today, I insist, it still remains a matter which the government could be brought to courts for misbehavior in public office, and they have never denied it. Even as I repeated this morning, I listened to another social commentator. Why is it commented this week? The larger the projects, the bigger the corruption. The contracts and the subcontracts. The insider trading. We have to be mindful of these things, because it's easy to lock up the guy who takes a bottle of alcohol off the shelf of a supermarket, or the lady who goes in and takes up something in one of the stores in Kingston. And we track them. And we name and shame people of that kind. But we have had businesses that came and disappeared. Have you heard the end output, for example, of the plane that disappeared from the radar? Where did it land? What did it take away with it? What the interest? Who benefited for the thousands of gallons of fuel that was sold to it? Did it ring alarm bells that somebody all of a sudden wanted this and that? Have you heard the end story?
But
if I had your privilege, I'm good. If I had your privilege, yes.
But
I'm a former opening batsman.
And Kenton, I've just been reminded as well that companies like the Mustique Company and Canawan, the agreements are actually acts.
Come before Parliament.
Exactly. So there's, to answer your question about what's wrong with the details and so on, I agree.
You know what the answer will be?
It should be.
That's what we will be told. But let's see.
Yeah.
I have two quick questions. Two more quick questions. Major League as the shadow person for national security. I was wondering if you are aware that there's currently no psychiatrists in this environment. even as a number of people who are charged with very serious offenses, including murder, some of them are waiting psychiatric evaluation. For instance, the last homicide in North Bay, what they did infanticide. It is my understanding that investigators have not even been able to interview the suspect in that case because of concerns about the person's psychiatric situation. So I want you to speak to that, and especially in light of the fact, like a lot of times when somebody is charged, especially with a serious offense, and the issue of the psychiatry comes to the fore, the public becomes very dismissive. But could it be that also because of the failure to address this issue, why we also having some of this?
Well, you have answered your own question. I trust your judgment. I don't want to trivialize it, but I understood that the psychiatrist left because he said too many crazy people in the Grenadines. No, I really don't want to.
My understanding is that she said that the workload is crazy.
The workload is crazy. So, but there you go. The fact of the matter that we can't have a society and take care of our mentally ill people, which is a serious problem, and don't appreciate the need to have not one, but certainly must be more than one. I've had the unfortunate privilege to go to what we call the mental home already. And I tell you, you wouldn't want to have your relatives being taken care of in the way that they are. I'm sure they're trying their best. But it's something that has to be arrested immediately, and I have no doubt that our shadow minister of health, Daniel Cummins, is speaking to this and working forward and having a solution. But we can't go on this. There's no way to do business.
If I may, because another important and brilliant question from the journalist again. It's not singly, I mean, I appreciate your linking it to health, but it's also a question that deals with legal affairs and justice. Because what we do have is that a number of persons who are currently in our prisons, they're arrested and charged for criminal offenses. But where the request has been made for them to be examined, in that sense, psychiatrically, that they have not been able to examine them. And they simply sitting languishing, of course, at state facilities. And for those persons who might just say, look, let them stay there because they committed an act. The person is not guilty until proven guilty. And part of proving that guilt is to establish that the mental element, what we call it in Latin, the mens rea of establishing the crime, has to be present. And that is where that assessment goes to. Let's imagine that someone from a foreign country comes to our shores, is charged for an offense, a very heinous offense, maybe murder, and then the advancement is made that this person needs to be assessed by a psychiatrist, and we don't have one. 6 months pass, a year pass, year and a half goes, 2, and in the foreign country where that person is a citizen, start to bring the pressure down on us in terms of our system and say, look, you have held our citizen for far too long, not being able to assess that person to determine his extent of criminality, and therefore you should release our citizen. Those kind of borders can be brought upon us because we have not put in place the necessary measures. It's a health indicator as to where we are, but it is a natural justice indicator that we need to resolve.
And also, I really appreciate and like the connection that my two colleagues have made with regards to a very, very important question, Kenton. In fact, a very critical question, because we cannot, of course, divorce the economic malaise that we currently go through and the connection to mental health and the challenges that we've been facing. I mean, you just need to walk around town and you look at the number of what we call as vagrants, people who are mentally challenged, people who may have had addictions and so on. And in large measure, in large measure, there's a connection between that and the economic hardships that people are going through. People are not working. I know personally constituents who are so challenged with mental health issues that they're afraid to come out and talk about for fear of being labeled as being crazy and all these kinds of things. And it's something that requires urgent attention beyond just talk. And this government, I am not so sure that this government is prepared or even capable of addressing this very important issue. But for what it's worth, we need to continue to flag it and to continue to raise the very important issue and to make it more sensitive to the people of this country and to the leaders and the government of this country.
My final question involves Mr. Reno, the job. As you may know, Mr. the job is on the quarantine in North America. Scores of small-scale farmers were uprooted and the lands were leased to Mr. Gajada for quarry. But information in the public domain suggests that Mr. Gajada is into the agricultural sector. I think a company that he founded or owns, in which he has an interest, has exported agricultural produce in the BVI. And the name of that company has also been mentioned as a potential quote-unquote aggregate to sell produce to some industries. Do you have any comments?
Well, what a sad state of affairs for our civilians in the days. We have come upon this information just like you, as media specialist and John Public. But you know, one of the places it struck us was when the leader of the party and the caretaker for the Marco community and others, I think Sister Lavon Phelps was also there, went to Montreal Gardens. One of our leadership visits, Senator Bruce was also there, and discovered that the Montreal greenhouse project, the BAM project, had failed to the extent that some of the places were being used as storage places for coconuts. By the said individuals, Reno. Now, this is not an anti-Reno or anti-whoever the person position, but it's not only the BAM project has failed, but he was now trying to rescue that project. In a way that I suppose sooner rather than later, he will also rescue some of the former storage depots that we have for bananas that ultimately end up as wet pet centers. You know, a lot of what has happened in St. Vincent and Grenadines speak to an absence of a government that understands how a private sector should be assisted and given a hands up to be driven by them. And the extent to which we are willing to give handouts to those who already have. I'll take 3 examples for you quickly as we try to conclude this today. I went to Bokoma a few weeks ago, where again the famed hotel is going into operation. And I went onto the beach. The people who were hitherto having the bar drinks and the fry this and fry that and doing playing the little trade on the Bokoma beach were given summary notice to get off the beach because it had to be made friendly to the hotel establishment. So the small man had to go because the big man had arrived. What did we do to put in place so that the small man can survive or benefit from this new investment that come in place? Because we're providing beach umbrellas, some standardized kind of facilities under which to sell and do more to make them coexist. Why do the small vendors in Middle Street who are making sense, where the former R.H. Strauss and Sons and G.W. Franklin, Sons and X.Y. and Sons and so on and so forth have lost business to our welcomed Lebanese and Syrian community? Why should they give way altogether? And don't misunderstand my placement. But when do we have a Vincent and Force policy and a small man force policy? You know, and so many places you go because that is consistent with the old paradigm that the Beckfords and the Lloyd Best and all our economists told us of plantation economy revisiting us. When we had the large estates, we put down ports, we put down shipping facilities. We had the Arrow Pool to support Arrow, Banana Association to support bananas, G-Shep to support farmers. When do we feel we can put down and invest to help the small man? When do we take a position of a bottom-up economy as again a top-down, and hoping that the large spend becomes will reach down to those at the bottom? Those are the equations that we have to look at. And that's where we are. It's an indictment
Benjamin, before you close, I just want to make one final comment, I presume, on that question that was raised by Kenton about the seeming transfer of interest and focus where the company came in to do stone quarry. If you take a further look at it, you might see that these guys are magicians, yeah? That they've turned stone into food. Yeah, that's a fun way to look at it. But there is a fundamental philosophical issue that underpins that particular act. Because you have to keep in mind that these guys were granted a wide expansion of duty-free allowances so that they could do the quarry business. These are the same vehicles, same things that are important that are now being used against, and I am prepared to say, against the local farmers. Because you had farmers in the North Leeward district who were taken off those lands and sent to other places to try to make a living. And I'm going to go to North Leeward, you know. My visit is coming. Because I have to respond to the question whether or not those very lands are the lands under cultivation by that entity that will welcome to our shores, push our locals to the side or to someplace else, and they don't then use the same lands for agricultural production when we were told that they were almost barren and all that was under them was stones. Are we turning stone into food? So we have to make sure that we protect the local farmers. You can't deprive our local farmers at the expense of bringing in the foreign investors. And we're clear about that.
First, I'm going to give you the mic, and I don't want to lose your thought.
Okay.
But I want to anchor this rich discussion, Kenton. In the last parliament, in the budgetary exercise, the Minister of Agriculture, Honorable Saboti, made one of the most fundamental statements, most profound statements that have ever been made in the Parliament of St. Vincent. And I can quote. He said, St. Vincent does not have a single product upon which we can export a container of goods on a weekly basis. This is a ministry and a minister where over $500 million has been invested over the last 10 years, saying that we have no product. Damsel, fat pork, guava, lime, bananas, breadfruit, daphne, whatsoever, that can fill a container in a sustained way. He said the last time we approximated that was when we as a collective joined with other Windward Islands parties. We needed St. Lucia and Dominica through Giz to ship bananas. So that's something to ponder on. How now would Reno suddenly be able to sustain on a weekly or a monthly basis container after container of produce to go abroad or to a domestic purchaser is something that we must ask seriously. We have a production and we have a productivity problem.
Kenton, I'm glad you asked that question too. And again, you know, my colleagues who spoke before me addressed it quite well, but I just wanted to add as well. I mean, Senator Bruce talked about all the concessions that Reno was granted when they came in here. All kinds of concessions, specifically for stone quarry, stone mining. And in the process, many farmers were displaced from down in that area. The very farmers now who are, I don't even want to say have to compete, Reno is competing with and against, because many of the farmers have been pretty much knocked out of business. But I just wanted to leave this thought in the minds of the Vincentian people. So here's a company you have given 100% duty-free, tax-free, VAT-free, you name it. A company, even if you had charged them 50%, you would have been able to generate quite a sizable percent, quite a sizable amount of tax revenue to help to finance and to run this country. But yet, in the 2024 budget, you come in and charge in ordinary poor Vincentians, increasing license fee, driver's license fees, increasing vehicle registration, increasing conductor registration. Poor Vincentians. Can you imagine increasing the charge to a conductor and a van from $15 to $100, and you have a company like Reno paying zero in taxes? This is why the New Democratic Party will continue to hold this government accountable. And this is where our broken promises tracker becomes very, very important. We have to continuously remind the people of this country how this government continues to pull the wool over our eyes in so many ways. We have to hold them accountable.
But not just for broken promises, but for future promises. For future promises. Kenton, I think if you have no more questions, we will want to call it a Koja.
We talk about absence of police transport. Because now the area police get is cheap. How we think that now? How many people?
How many?
What happened to the people?
The absence of police transport in the area.
Well, well, that's a perennial excuse that's given. That deserves more examination. If you go down to the police licensing place, inspection place, it's like a cemetery for vehicles. Vehicles parked upon vehicles, either because they don't have parts, because they be reckless driving, bad care, maintenance. So we have that wastage. So we clearly have to have different levels of accountability. And it's serious, you know, because we talk about the regular vehicles to transport police from here to there. But at the fire service, we had to close down the airport in Beckley recently because they had no fire engine. It's as basic as that. You couldn't anticipate they would need part A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, or I. Look at how many of the local police stations are on service because we don't have fire units placed at them. So look at how many vehicles are still taking policemen around without proper provision. I see they have tried to take the better model of doing something like vans. You put steel protection around them so that and bench so that they can sit so they're not hanging on the benches. There's so much to be desired and to be done for the police safety and not for public safety now. The Prime Minister was right when he said that we needed to have reform and examination of the police force. And I think, forget his big F, a new Minister of National Security will bring different insights into how police force should be run. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
What, Major, just before you conclude,
I thought we were going to offer lunch.
Just to remind,
just
just to remind viewers and listeners and the general public of our of the NDP on the program, and NDP on the Go program, which ends tonight at 7:30 again. I think it was last week, Wednesday was the first airing. Very interesting program which highlights various issues around the country that the NDP is on top of and being engaged on these issues. So tonight at 7:30.
The other good Wednesday night social media programs that
yes.
you can exercise your choice as well.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
But Fitz, you are the former goalkeeper when you leave this meeting. We're saying that you were with the U20 football team.
That's correct. Last
night, passed on, not goalkeeping tips because I don't think you had named that you were before, but still on behalf of it's a good thing, you know. It's really a good thing. I heard a radio station earlier this week questioning the heart of the New Democratic Party in sports. Now, here's a former president, here's a former general secretary, here's a former national goalkeeper, administrator, executive. A party that brought St. Vincent through its members to 73 in the world and can speak and boast of sports. We wish the under-20 footballers out there. Well, I understand that there's good talent. I understand we have a few Vincentians abroad.
Yes.
And that's it. And don't ever forget the brand Vinci Heat was developed by yours truly, Major, the Honorable St. Vincent. We can do it. Let's get the thing done.
Let's get it done.
Let's win the thing only.
Thank you.